I basically spoke to my boss in the community pharmacy setting and said, I need to move. I need to go somewhere else. And she was really kind and she said, yes, absolutely. I can see you're not happy. You need to move.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Clinical Pharmacist podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time today, my name's Ruhina, and I am the CEO of Clinical Pharmacist Solutions and your host. As always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host and our COO, Sarah Dekmak. Today, we are continuing our series on entrepreneurship and alternative pharmacist career pathways, where we've been joined by a number of exceptional pharmacists who have done something different and built something unique along the way. Today, we're really excited to be joined by Komal George, who has built a truly impressive career. So this is going to be a really exciting episode. Komal is a fractional digital clinical safety officer and has co-founded the Female Pharmacy Leadership Network with over 20 years of experience across healthcare, wellness, and health tech. Komal has explored several different ways pharmacists can use their skills beyond traditional roles. So thank you, Komal, for being here today. It's really lovely to have you. I'd love to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Happy to share my journey. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to speak to you guys today. I, as you mentioned, have been a pharmacist for over 20 years, and that journey has been very non-linear, shall we say, when it comes to careers. I started off actually as a hospital pharmacist way back when. I did my pre-registration in St Mary's Hospital in London. And actually, some people might be able to relate to this, but I didn't get a single community pharmacy interview for my pre-reg, which was the reason why I ended up working in hospital pharmacy. So it was kind of by accident in many ways. So I became a hospital pharmacist, worked in pharmacy for a number of years in a couple of different hospitals, did my clinical certificate, and then moved into community pharmacy. And I remember when I left hospital, that my tutor for my clinical pharmacy diploma basically said to me, you're going to the other side. And that was a real oh, I wonder why they're saying that sort of moment. You know, I knew there was a lot of differences between community pharmacy and hospital pharmacy. And probably at that stage in the pharmacy sector, it was quite wide. But I took the leap anyway, ended up working in community pharmacy for a number of years and ended up finding myself working for a few different pharmacies, but predominantly working for a pharmacy that provided medication for nursing homes and care homes. And I did that for a couple of years until I didn't realize at the time, burnt out and realized that I needed to take a different path. One of my real desires, even from when I was way back when I was a student, was that I realized quite early on that I was not a clinical person. Like, I'm not very good on the clinical side. And I think it's really important to know what your strengths are and what they're not. But I had this deep passion and respect, I would say, for the profession. And so I always knew that I wanted to explore the different pathways that are available to pharmacists. So I took a leap of faith and I applied for a job at the National Pharmacy Association, which you may be familiar with, is one of the largest, or was one of the largest trade associations in the UK at the time. It was, again, a very accidental decision. I basically spoke to my boss in the community pharmacy setting and said, I need to move. I need to go somewhere else. And she was really kind. And she said, yes, absolutely. I can see you're not happy. You need to move. And I literally opened up the back of the PJ, the pharmaceutical journal, which back in those days we used to get the paper versions of, which had adverts, job adverts in the back of them. And I saw this advert for the National Pharmacy Association, and the role was expiring. The date for application was literally the day that I opened the PJ. And so I took a leap of faith. I contacted them, I called them, and I said, can I apply for this job? And they said yes. And so I did. Cut a long story short, I ended up getting the job at the NPA, moved on from there to the pharmacy negotiator, so the Pharmaceutical Services Negotiating Committee, which now is Community Pharmacy England. And since that time, I've moved on in many different areas. I started my own turmeric supplement after I left the negotiator. I trained as a health coach and as a career coach. And then more recently, obviously founded the Female Pharmacy Leaders Network in 2021, which has been an amazing journey. And again, accidentally found myself in digital safety, which I'm sure we can go into later. But yeah, it's been a extremely varied career journey, I would say.
No, it's actually really impressive. And I think you've touched on so many different things there. I feel like I'm being a bit of a fangirl because you've done so many like wonderful things. I think actually the fact that you touched on burning out in pharmacy, I think that's something that we don't always talk about, or when we recognize it, I think as pharmacists, we're very quick to just brush it under the carpet and be like, I'm just going to continue. But actually recognizing that this isn't for me anymore and taking the next step to be like, I want to do this. And I think that in itself is massive. I think you've done so many different and wonderful things, and just taking that leap of faith is something that sometimes we feel stuck in doing. So, literally, from that community pharmacy to that NPA job, a lot of people would see, oh, it ends today. I'm not going to be able to apply, but actually taking that step one further, contacting them and saying, can I actually apply for this position? I think that in itself is probably advice and like a life lesson for pharmacists that are listening today. Like, it, if you don't take that risk, if you don't send that email, you're not going to have that opportunity. I'm excited about all the things, like all the questions that we have to ask you now. So let's start with turmeric supplements. How did that come about?
It was really random, I have to say. I reached a point in my career where I had this vision for what I wanted to achieve, and I had achieved that. I basically got to national level, and I was like, okay, what next? And I think that's what I didn't quite prepare myself for that question, because I think in our heads we have these ideas that, okay, I'm going to become a leader, or I'm going to become somebody that works for perhaps a national organization. And what I didn't realize is that when you get there, there is that need to keep challenging yourself. And I think that it's just a human nature that we like to learn more. And as pharmacists, we're really good at that. Like, we just love learning more and extending our knowledge and extending our skills. And so when I got to the negotiator, one thing I realized was I looked up and I looked sideways, and none of those pathways felt like they were my path, right?
Yeah.
And so I was really fortunate because in my very first maternity leave, when I had my son, the maternity leave gave me the space to think. And even though you're busy with this baby and everything, but you'd be surprised at how much in 2 a.m. in the morning, whilst you're feeding this child, you just have this like space to think about what it is that you want to do in your life. And it was during that maternity leave that I thought, you know what? Explore something different, Komal, And I just started doing a bit of research. I had been, through my maternity leave and through my pregnancy, had been very keen on being very like natural in terms of like how I managed my health. During that time, I was like really conscious about what I was eating, and because obviously everything that you eat during motherhood goes to the baby. So I was just really conscious of that. And I come from an Indian background, and our cultural background is very much connected to how we sort of holistically live in our
Yep.
lives. And so that was really at the fore during my pregnancy and my maternity leave. And I was taking all of the natural kind of food, eating all the natural foods and things that we eat after post pregnancy. And turmeric was the one that I kept coming back to. And one day I was just going, well, actually, there's something about turmeric that has been like constant in my whole life. And I've always been really interested in sort of like holistic health and natural health anyway, just through my own cultural background. And so I just started researching it, and I started looking at it, and I thought, oh my God, actually, maybe I could develop my own supplement. And it was obviously, as a pharmacist, we know about medicines, we know about supplements. But being a business owner and actually creating one for yourself is a completely different path.
Yep.
And I used to spend like days and hours like researching online, and I would be like reading up things, and I would be like speaking to people. And one thing I've always known, and this is something that I think is so important for us to do in our careers, is I keep inserting myself in places where you don't see pharmacists, right? And that's basically what I did during that time. I went to loads of like wellness events. You don't see pharmacists at wellness events. Like, they're just not there. So I just started going to all of these events and things, and just learning more about like the wellness space and the supplement space. And that's really how the turmeric supplement came about. I was naive, like super naive. And I think that naivety was actually a positive thing because when you start a company like a supplement company, there's a lot that you've got to learn. It's super quick.
Yeah.
And there are skills you've got to learn about branding, and you've got to learn about marketing, and you've got to learn about sales, and you've got to learn about how you're going to manufacture this thing. I mean, I remember sitting there for hours online trying to find contract manufacturers who were going to manufacture this formulation that I had decided was the right one, you know? And so you just learn so much on that journey.
It seems like an out of this world journey. And I think there's probably people that are sitting there because, you know, you've taken something that's quite personal to yourself during your journey. You've seen something from your background, from your heritage that's been a constant in your life, like turmeric. Like it has so many health benefits. Then you've used your niche skills of being like a pharmacist to be like, how can I make this into something that is useful for other people and not just myself? If a pharmacist wanted to start their own supplement company, where would they even start?
Well, I mean, look, we've got amazing clinical skills, right?
Hmm.
So, really the first place you want to be starting off is understanding what is the gap in the market. And I think that's one of the key mistakes I would say that I made
Hmm.
because I was in a way making this for myself. But actually, if you make it for yourself, is there a market for that? And I think sometimes we can get wrapped up into, well, my clinical skills are really good and I know what a formulation should look and feel like, but actually, have I done enough market research? Have I spoken to enough people to really understand what is the market gap here that I'm trying to fill? So I would definitely start with that. And conversations is the only way to do that. Like actually get on calls with people, speak to them, see what they've used, what they haven't used, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And through that is what is going to come fall out the bottom end. And sometimes what we create for ourselves is great for lots of other people, and sometimes it's not. And unless you've done that market research, you can't really tell. So I would definitely say that the market research piece is the bit that we should start with. And I have to say that is the bit that most of us feel really uncomfortable with as pharmacists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a skill set that we don't necessarily have ingrained into like our M-Pharm degree, or it's a skill set that we kind of just have to research and learn and find out what works best. I'm sure there's been like loads of other skills that you've had to learn throughout that phase as well, such as branding, marketing, media, finances, accounting, a whole new bunch of skills, essentially. It's not something we get taught as part of our degree. If someone wanted kind of advice on doing that, were there any resources, any books, anything that you found really useful or helpful during that period of time that helped you to grow that brand?
Yeah, there's actually so many useful resources out there, actually. There's a couple of, so number one, the British Library has got a business department. And honestly, if you have any inkling that you want to start your own business, that is one of the best places to start. And I was really fortunate because I actually live not that far away from the British Library. I live in North London. And so I would literally get the train down and I would get my library card and I would go and sit in the British Library and I would read. They've got all of the market intelligence papers there that you have access to, all the latest like Mintel research and everything. You can go there and you can do your research there. And they even have people there who are trademark experts and IP experts, and you can speak to those people about your idea completely NDA'd and everything. And they will give you free advice. And so the British Library is one of the best, honestly, resources that I found. They do lots of free courses as well that you can attend to really learn about what's happening. I mean, since then, the explosion of like people that are out there that can support you is just amazing. So obviously speak to people in the field, right? Whatever that field is that you're going to be moving into, start forging relationships with those people and start having conversations with them and learning from them. A lot of them have got their own YouTube channels now and got their own podcasts. Listen to these things because you will learn a lot. In terms of finances, I can honestly say one of the best books that I have ever read is Profit First by this guy called Michael Michalowicz. And it's fundamentally changed the way in which I operate my business now, and all the businesses that I would even remotely inclined to support. It's such a great book because it teaches you in really simple terms, like, how do you manage the finances?
Yeah.
The accountant's there to do that job, but actually on a day to day, you need to know your numbers. Like, you need to know what's coming in, what's going out, where the money's being spent, what it's being spent on, right? And it's really set me up for a practice that I literally operate on to this day. I will look at my bank account on a monthly basis and I will look at, okay, well, where did the money go?
Yeah.
And what did I spend it on? And it's not just I've just spent it on a whole bunch of stuff and now I've got nothing for myself. But the key thing that I've learned from that book is you have got to pay yourself. Like, if you don't pay yourself, then you don't really have a business.
Yeah.
So those are the resources that I would say are really important.
Okay, I think that's really interesting. I didn't know that the British Library had that resource available. And I think for anyone that's listening, they probably are just as surprised as we are. Sometimes it's nice to kind of take yourself away from the surroundings that you're in. So to actually be in the British Library, somewhere completely like neutral or different to where you normally may be, and to have that access to all that great information, that's something that's probably very eye-opening and game changing as well at the same time. Definitely will be picking up a copy of that book. So, yeah, thank you for that advice as well. I think a key theme of this podcast has been like, what's next? And you said it yourself so very rightly there. What's next? And like, you've done so many different things over the years. And one thing that like I've connected with you personally and Sarah has connected with you personally on is the Female Leadership Network. And that has been amazing. And it's been like very eye-opening for females across the pharmacy sector to be able to join this network. I think we've discussed many times as well that it's been a very unusually safe space because you don't find these kind of spaces very often. What was your motivation? How did that come about?
I got fed up, basically. It's basically what happened. I had been the only woman in the room for far too long. And I remember even the time that I spent in the wellness industry, I was going to all these like events and stuff, and I was going to like all these amazing conferences and meetups and everything. And I would literally be like the only pharmacist in the room. Sometimes I'd be the only Asian woman in the room. And I'm like, where are the women here? You know? And the network literally started off with this one post. And that one post on LinkedIn blew up. And that post was, I literally just put it out there and I said, where are all of my Asian, female, black, and I don't like using the minority ethnic term. Where are the women of color here? Like, where are they? Because I don't see them. Yeah. And I just said, look, just tag somebody that you know who is doing incredible things, who is a woman of color on this post. And that post blew up. Like, I had so many comments on that post. And that's when Rena reached out to me. And our paths had kind of done that because I'd left the negotiator and she joined as the only female Asian committee member. And she said, we've got to do something about this. Like, I don't want to be the last, right? I don't want to be the first and I don't want to be the last. So what are we going to do about this? And so we decided that we would run a session on International Women's Day. And at the time it was COVID. And so everything was still online. And the NHS was running an International Women's Day event online. And we pitched to run a panel for that event. And we got accepted. And so we did the event. And we were blown away, like, by the number of women who showed up for that and were just asking lots of questions. They were really interested in the stories of these incredible women. We had Tasse there at that first one, Sadina Agama and Helen Kilminster. And like, they were amazing, right, on this panel. And so that was the point at which we just knew, like, we had to create this space. And I think for me personally, and I know this is the case for Rena too, is we wanted to create this space where women feel like they can be open about the challenges that they're experiencing. And we wanted it to be a safe space. We'd spent too long surrounded by leaders who didn't provide that safe space for us, and we wanted to create that. So that's really how the network started and its ethos. And I can honestly say that ethos is still there today because we make it so.
Yeah. I'd say that these days, or society in general, it can be a man's world sometimes, and you may not have the confidence to speak up. And also in that environment, it may be that there are other females, but people don't speak to each other or communicate to each other. So that can make it maybe a competitive environment, and people don't really sort of empathize with each other. And I feel like when you meet that one person that you work with, hint, hint, Ruhina, we've opened up to each other about things to do with work. And I think it's been great to have a safe space in work. And then I think when we came to the retreat and just the way you are, Komal, the way you spoke at the beginning, I think it's just the small thing. Like if you need to leave the room, just go. Even that as a point, it just made me feel safe instantly. I was like, I don't feel locked in. I don't feel locked down. I feel like, let's just go. We can do whatever we want here. We're here to have a nice day, speak to each other. But yeah, what sort of advice would you give for anyone who feels like they're sort of internally struggling right now and don't have anyone, they don't feel like they can go to anyone at work, or, I mean, obviously they can come with us when we go to the retreat, for example, but
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm glad you asked that question because there are so many women in pharmacy who do feel isolated and they do feel like they don't have that person that they can speak to in their workplace. And there's that fear, isn't it? What if I speak to somebody and then it comes back on me for some reason, or we're surrounded by people in toxic leadership? I hate to say it, but it does exist. I've coached women in pharmacy who've worked in really toxic environments and they still do exist. And so in that place, you're constantly in that fight or flight mode. Like you don't feel comfortable speaking. And I would say, look, our network is one of the places where you can come. There's a home for you here in the network. Come to our meetups and listen to other women. You don't have to partake. You just have to be there and listen. And, when you're ready, you can open up. And I can honestly say you can reach out to any person in this network and they will create time for and, listen to podcasts like this, hear from other people and connect with those individuals because fundamentally, as human beings, we want to help other human beings. Like that's what 100% with every single cell in my body believe, you know? And so I think it's so important that you might reach out to somebody and they might not respond to you. That's okay. Like It happens. They're busy. They've got things that are going on, but don't give up. Reach out to somebody else. There's plenty of us out there.
I think that's something that's really important to note on, because I think sometimes you can reach out to multiple people and you can get no response, especially when you're trying to make a difference. And this is why this kind of network is so different, because it's actually very like-minded people that are really open and kind of accepting of anyone that wants help, that is trying to achieve something. There's no kind of, as you say, there's no gatekeeping, there's no like politics, as we can put it nicely. I think we've probably all worked or experienced some sort of political, like workplace or friendship or help or support that you may have needed. And I think we can't just get that away and say that it doesn't exist, because it does exist. But it's so nice to actually genuinely be in a place where, I think Sarah will probably tell you, I'm very blunt and open about, okay, this is a positive environment, this is a negative environment. Like, we only want to be in those positive environments. And I'm like, okay, this isn't for me, this is too energy draining. But this is actually one place where we've been so surprisingly happy that it's actually that open. I think Sarah and myself attended the retreat last year. So if anyone that is listening, the retreat is hands down like
life-changing.
Yeah, it's an amazing event, and you get to meet so many lovely females that are doing such great things, but actually keeping that relationship post the event and wanting to come back the next year, attending the smaller events throughout the year and keeping that network of females has actually been really lovely along the way. So I think thank you, all of you, for creating that lovely space. And if anyone is listening and looking for the direction to go in, or actually being in a space where you're kind of accepted as a female pharmacist, whether you're from an ethnic minority, whether you're not. There were students there at one of the recent events who was just so impressive. And there's just different generations of pharmacists all coming together in one place without any bias. So again, fangirl for the network. That's going to be the theme here.
Oh, you guys, honestly, I mean, to hear that kind of feedback is just priceless for me, because that's exactly the reason why we run the retreat. And I think that what I've come to realize is the leaders make the environment.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't lead in the way that we want our spaces to operate, then that carries on. And we've seen it play out, right, in our workplaces so many times. And for me, it was so important that we set that scene, that we lead in the way that we want, you know, our lives to operate. It's like I keep saying, which is be the change you wish to see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't operate like that, then the people around me aren't going to either. And so it really does start with yourself. How are you leading? Like, how do you want that space to be? And I'm so glad that you said that, Sarah, that you felt comfortable, because I think so many times we're looking for permission, aren't we?
Yeah, even to go to the toilet. It's not like you need to ask, but from your retreat, it was like, if you need to go, everyone's just like, hey, bye,
Right.
That's freedom that you don't get in a day-to-day life, I suppose. Yeah.
And I think we have to basically set the framework from the beginning and say, well, this is okay. It's okay for you to go and do this. And it's okay for you to be however you want to be in this space. And that's what I think is really powerful about this network, that because we have laid down that foundation, people feel that they can be themselves and they can say whatever they want to say. And they know that it's not going to come back against you, because we want to help you. And the people that are there are only ever there because they believe in that ethos themselves.
Yeah. Agreed. I think we're excited for the event that's coming up. So for anyone that's listening that wants to join and attend the event, I'm sure we can pop the link below in the comments. So book your tickets. Sarah and I will be there with Komal, Ruhina, and the rest of the lovely ladies at the network. So Komal, exciting. Tell us a little bit more about your role as a fractional digital clinical safety officer. That's something that's quite a new role that we don't really hear much about.
No, it is new, and it literally landed on my plate. And you know what? I was telling somebody this the other day, and we were just like giggling to each other about it. Because one thing I've realized is that when you start putting yourself in places where you don't see pharmacists, or when you start doing things that might be a little bit outside of the box, so to speak, pardon the pun, as we say, opportunities open up. And that's basically what happened here. So I was working on a project for a HbA1c testing followed by lifestyle change program. And I was using this piece of software. And I'd been using it for a while, and I'd got introduced to the CEO of the company for a while. And so I knew this guy fairly well. And one day he turned around to me and he said, will you be my clinical safety officer? And I was like, what is that? And he said, well, this is the thing. And he sent me the details, and I had a look at it, and I kind of checked out what digital clinical safety was and what the standards were as part of the NHS. And for anyone that doesn't know, basically the digital clinical safety standards are NHS standards that are applied to all digital health products, essentially, that are deployed within the NHS. So they have to comply with these standards. There's a safety case that they have to put in place. And in order to deliver on that, you need a clinical safety officer. And a clinical safety officer has to be a clinician. So you have to be a registered clinical professional, and you have to have done the clinical safety training. So I went off and I did the clinical safety training, only to realize, well, as pharmacists, A, patient safety is like in our blood, number one. And B, we're very process driven people. So we can operate that process and that procedure fairly competently and confidently. And so I became his fractional digital clinical safety officer, and one thing just led on to another. And so now I kind of work with multiple companies, as well as like NHS projects as well, really supporting them on embedding sort of clinical safety thinking really essentially in their product development. So alongside making sure they've got their safety documentation in place.
It's just amazing, the different roles that, like, you've done and all the experience that you've gained, if a pharmacist wanted to actually look to go down this pathway, what advice could you give them? How could they start to get involved?
Yeah, I get messaged on LinkedIn about how to do digital clinical safety work all the time. And actually, somebody messaged me literally the other day, and I said, go check out the NHS website on digital clinical safety. They run training, but there's others that run training as well out there. There's a company called DPM, there's DigiSafe, there's a couple of different companies who offer actual digital clinical safety training. So go check those companies out. And the NHS one is the one that I did because it was straightforward and there's 3 different stages of it, and you can go in person and you can learn. So that's definitely the place to go. I actually think that everyone should just do like the basic clinical safety training anyway, because it's really important that you understand what it is. Even if you are a pharmacist who or pharmacy professional who doesn't have any intention of working in digital health, your life crosses into digital health all the time.
Yeah.
So go do the training anyway, because you will learn what clinical safety in the digital health sphere actually is.
Okay, perfect. So, Komal, there's so many other things that you have done. So, you also sit on a medical advisory board for the Menstrual Health Project. Are you able to just tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, and again, this when I say network, like honestly, I know it's such a cliche when people say network is your net worth, but genuinely it is. So I met the ladies from the Menstrual Health Project really by accident, actually. What happened is I was invited to a women's health event, and actually these women couldn't make it because they're both sufferers of endometriosis and they were really unwell and they just couldn't make the event. But I reached out to them afterwards because I was just really taken by their mission. Like they really want to help young women learn more about their menstrual health and menstruation in general, to understand early on, like what are those signs and symptoms and how to advocate for themselves. And that was really personal because I just thought I had been diagnosed with fibroids, actually. I didn't even know I had them. And I was just like, wow, if I have been suffering with fibroids and there's women out there suffering with conditions far worse than mine, we need to educate. And that's what the Menstrual Health Project does effectively. And so I reached out to these amazing women and had a conversation with them about what they're doing because I just really felt aligned to their work. And then a couple of months down the line, they said, will you join our medical advisory board? Not expecting it at all, to be honest. And also cognizant of the fact that there was no pharmacist on the medical advisory board, because I'd said to them, oh, you've got these great templates, but are they in pharmacies? And have we disseminated them to pharmacy professionals? And so, yeah, that's basically how I ended up on their medical advisory board. But they're amazing. And there are so many charities within the women's health space that are doing incredible work. And I think it's, for me, working with them has really brought to the fore this relationship between women's health and leadership. We cannot affect change in women's health if we do not have female leaders.
100%. 100% agree with it. I think there's so much that can be done in that space, and it needs to be females that are actually like understanding it, going through it, being there, being the voice for that change. So I think, do you know what? As you said, like for anyone that is looking for these new opportunities or doing something a little bit different, as Komal said, your network is so important. It's about getting out there. It's about talking to people. It doesn't necessarily have to be the right people. It's just about getting out there and seeing what others are doing, taking an interest, seeing what you can learn, and just getting involved. I think it's okay to sit at home and say, oh, this is great, or doing some training, but actually getting out there and speaking to people. And I think that's one of the main things that has been a very common theme across the podcast, networking and having that good support like system around you. So I'm going to wrap up in a minute because I know I will be here forever and ask you so many questions. But throughout your journey, you've done kind of the corporate in terms of like the MPA and the big company. You've gone into your own business in terms of the turmeric company. You've co-founded the Female Pharmacy Leaders Network. And you've also then gone on to be a fractional clinical safety officer. Out of all of these experiences, what are the key bits of advice that you would give to people that are listening today? What has been, whether it's your own advice, whether it's something that someone's given you that's driven you, what's the key bits of advice that you give throughout your journey so far?
There's that saying that says curiosity killed the cat,
Yeah.
right? And actually, curiosity is what drives career changes, genuinely. Like, I have said this before, and I'll keep saying it. Just be curious about what else is out there and what can be delivered. And put yourself in those rooms. Like, literally ask if you can be in there. And the only difference, I said this to somebody the other day, literally the only difference between myself and them is I just asked the question. I think that's the difference. Like, you just have to be brave and courageous and ask the question. You will get knocked back, let me tell you, right? It's not like I haven't had knockbacks. I definitely have. But that's okay. Because you know what? You learned something along the way as well about yourself, about how you could ask next time, about what it is that you might tailor a bit differently. You've got to put yourself in those rooms. Just ask the question, be curious, and that will get you far. It will get you really far.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. So everyone remember, curiosity killed the cat. Yeah, I think that goes a long way itself. Komal, if people wanted to find you, if you want to talk a little bit about the event or anything that's coming up.
Yeah, I mean, look, if anyone wants to contact me, then, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Drop me a DM if you want to have a conversation. Female Pharmacy Leaders Network's on LinkedIn, and we've got our website as well. So go follow us on LinkedIn and join the network as well. We'll let you know about all of our upcoming events. Like you ladies have very succinctly explained, we've got the retreat coming up. That's happening on the 23rd of June. So if you want to come and join us, we'll be more than happy to welcome you to the retreat. And that's how you can stay in touch.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us today, Komal, and sharing your journey. I think conversations like this are really valuable because it shows that pharmacy just doesn't have to be a single pathway. There's so many ways our skills can translate into different opportunities. I think we've talked about some really important things. We've talked about actually recognizing your own skill set, recognizing what burnout looks like, and having a really good support network around you and making the most out of opportunities, making sure that you're getting yourself out there, as well as so much great advice that you've given to everyone. So it's really inspiring to hear like how you've shaped your career and like the impact that you're having. So thank you everyone else for listening. And we hope this episode has given you something to think about if you're thinking about exploring something different in your career. As always on this podcast, there's no gatekeeping, just honest conversations, and we hope to see you in the next episode.